So magnanimous.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Let me use my own power. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our final select federal natural resource management committee of the interim. We'll go ahead and start off with a roll call here in a minute, but just as a reminder to focus on decorum as always. We've got a good group here, and so I can't anticipate it being a problem. Just as a reminder, we know we talk about ideas, not people, and make sure you address your comments through the chair so we have a thorough and efficient meeting. So with that being said, welcome. Looking forward to a productive meeting, and we'll go ahead and do a roll call.
Mr. Chairman, this is a roll call for Select Federal Natural Resource Management Committee on November 13th, 2023. Senator Ellis.
Present.
Senator Kolb.
Present.
Representative Tarver.
Here.
Representative Winter.
Here.
Co-Chairman Heiner.
Here.
Chairman Boner.
Here.
You have a quorum.
All right. So first topic we have is state forestry good neighbor positions. So we'll have LSO give us a brief overview of 24 LSO 120.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Talise Hansen, LSO. I am presenting Bill Draft 24 LSO 120 State Forestry Good Neighbor positions. This bill draft authorizes additional employees funded through the Wyoming State Forestry Good Neighbor Authority revolving account. Section 1 amends Wyoming Statute 36-1-503B, which governs the powers and duties of the state forester. Subsection B is amended to increase the at-will employee contract positions from 4 positions to 10 positions. Section 2 provides an effective date of July 1, 2024, and I'll stand for any questions.
Okay, thank you. Pretty straightforward bill draft to get started with. Any questions for LSO regarding what the bill does? Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Next up, we have the U.S. Forest Service and our state forester. So anybody from the Forest Service in attendance?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, welcome to the committee. Feel free to introduce yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Chairman Bonner. Well, good morning, everyone. Chairman Heiner, Chairman Bonner, members of the Select Federal Natural Resources Management Committee. Thank you for inviting me here today to testify on the state forestry agencies and good neighbor authority positions. I'm Chris Campbell, the Deputy Regional Forester for the Intermountain region of the U.S. Forest Service. Before I begin, I'd like to take a moment to recognize and thank Wyoming State Forester Kelly Norris for all her expertise and collaboration to support our important work over the years. As you may know, the Forest Service manages 8 national forests within the state boundaries of Wyoming, split across 2 regions, the Rocky Mountain region based in Lakewood, Colorado, and the Intermountain region where I work, based here in Ogden, Utah. Today, I'm representing both regions. These regions include all or portions of national forests, including the Bridger Teton, Caribou Targhee, Ashley, Uinta Wasatch Cache, Black Hills, Bighorn, Shoshone, Medicine Bow Route, and the Thunder Basin National Grasslands. Over the last few decades, across the forests of Wyoming, we have experienced devastating fires and insect epidemics, which severely altered the health of our forested landscapes. Healthy forests and grasslands provide clean water, conserve biodiversity, provide a myriad of safe recreation opportunities, and make critical contributions to economies of the region and the nation. We strive to restore resilient landscapes, reduce wildfire risk, protect communities and lives. We also strive to improve forest and grassland health and deliver values, products, and services to the American public. Since 2020, the Forest Service has had a formal shared stewardship agreement with the state of Wyoming. Under this agreement and through the Good Neighbor Authority, local, state, and tribal governments, collaborative groups, non-governmental organizations, private landowners, and the Forest Service are working together like never before. In order to leverage the potential of this agreement, each participating stakeholder has built their workforce capacity and coalition support in order to more effectively move out on our complementary cross-boundary treatments over the landscape. We share in the stewardship of these lands to achieve our shared priorities, and we recognize the need and value of additional capacity within the Wyoming State Forestry Division. The expertise, flexibility, and efficiency to enhance capacity will benefit us all and the natural resources that are so important in Wyoming. Now, I would also like to share some examples of our success on the ground in this work. Since 2017, the Forest Service has invested approximately $10.5 million in the state of Wyoming through Good Neighbor Authority, with an additional $1.85 million in non-cash contributions and $1.2 million cash and non-cash contributions from the state of Wyoming. Accomplishments to date include just under 47,000 CCF harvested and 11,000 acres treated to remove hazardous fuels and manage invasive weeds. These investments are made through the 3 Good Neighbor Authority master agreements with the Wyoming State Forestry Division, Wyoming Game and Fish Department, and the Wyoming Department of Agriculture. Recently, the bipartisan infrastructure law has also funded additional Wyoming Good Neighbor Authority agreement projects in an effort to reduce wildfire risk and restore healthy forests across the state. On the Bighorn National Forest, these funds have been used to support a seasonal forester position with the Wyoming State Forestry Department that provides the Forest Service with personnel to assist with pre-NEPA silviculture work, implementation of timber sales, and implementation of timber stand improvement activities. On the Medicine Bow Route National Forest, these funds have been used to support the Sandstone North project to reduce hazardous fuels around private property and along State Highway 70, which is a major wildfire suppression fuel break in the Sierra Madre Range. In addition, this work enhances the aspen stands and associated wildlife habitat in the area. We also have Good Neighbor Authority agreements with Sheridan, Johnson, Laramie, Bighorn, Albany, and Carbon counties. These county level agreements cover weed treatments, emergency flood assistance, and burned area recovery work. Another one of our success stories has been a 3-year collaboration between the Medicine Bow Route National Forest and the Wyoming Department of Agriculture, which has leveraged federal funds to begin construction of exterior and interior replacement fencing damaged during the 2020 Mullen Fire. Additionally, the Bridger-Teton National Forest, in coordination with county collaboratives, recently finalized a 10-year vegetation management plan that is aligned with our agency's 10-year wildfire crisis strategy. The forest also put $1.02 million into a supplemental project agreement for a Good Neighbor Authority position that will focus on the projects identified in this 10-year veg plan. The dedication of a GNA forester is greatly needed to improve these projects in a timely manner and is expected to reduce the time to complete a project from 3 to 5 years down to only 1 to 2 years. Currently, the forest is estimating the removal of almost 140,000 tons of biomass and conducting fuels treatments on 77,000 acres through 2031. I'm sure State Forester Norris will elaborate on the great success of the Good Neighbor Authority program in her upcoming testimony. However, I don't think that I can understate the effectiveness of using Good Neighbor Authority to leverage federal funds through more streamlined state contracting systems. This work has allowed the state to increase board feet harvested and processed at Wyoming mills. In the almost decade since GNA was first implemented, our state forestry partners have conducted over 30 million board feet in timber sales on our national forests, from the Bridger-Teton to the Bighorn and Black Hills, to the Medicine Bow to the Uinta-Wasatch Cache. We view this Good Neighbor Authority partnership as a great success story, one that allows us to utilize timber resources on federal lands, improving forest health while reducing wildfire risk and helping Wyoming businesses succeed. In closing, I want to again express the importance of our joint shared stewardship and Good Neighbor Authority work that is making a difference across the state of Wyoming. We will continue to look for opportunities to use and support these agreements to accomplish our collective work. Individual agencies and entities could not achieve alone what we are able to achieve together through these agreements and across the landscapes. We look forward to our continued work with you, well, with the agencies, and with the Wyoming State Forester. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Campbell. I appreciate your testimony. Any questions, committee? Okay, well, I have one. Now we're contemplating increasing the number of authorized positions for the state. I'm just wondering, right now we have 10. Do you have a rough estimate as to what the capacity may be, either in terms of the amount of work that needs to be done or the constraints within your own budget?
So I don't know the specifics and the funding that's available that could be used by the state. That might be a better question for State Forester Norris. But I do know that there's definitely a need for increased staffing to support the great increase in work that we're seeing across the state of Wyoming.
Okay, thank you, sir. Any further questions? Representative Winter.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Campbell, in your opening, you indicated that or spoke about a 10-year vegetation management plan. Could you elaborate on that somewhat? Some details, maybe?
Yes, sir. So Representative Winter, so the 10-year vegetation management plan is a strategic plan where we would outline the timber works, the timber sales that we would see that need to be done on the landscape, as well as our fuels reduction work. Typically in years 1 through 3, the NEPA would already be completed for that project work. But as the out year projects are identified, there would need to be NEPA work done to complete that work. And so it's a way for the forest to engage with our partners and outline the work that needs to be done on the landscape, and to start to get alignment on kind of the pipeline of work that needs to be done to make sure that happens, and to align the budgets and budget requests on our end to get the work done on the ground.
Any further questions, committee? Okay, thank you, sir. Appreciate your testimony.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, we have Forester Norris and the State Forestry Division.
Good morning, Chairman Heiner, Chairman Boner, and members of the Select Federal Natural Resource Committee. My name is Kelly Norris, and I am the Wyoming State Forester. Thank you for inviting me here today to present to you about the Good Neighbor Authority program State Forestry implements. With me here is Travis Pardue, our partnership coordinator. I want to thank Deputy Regional Forester Chris Campbell for his support and acknowledgement of the success the Good Neighbor Authority program has become for Wyoming. Currently, State Forestry has 19 active U.S. Forest Service agreements across 6 national forests within 2 regions. We also have 3 active BLM agreements. These agreements total $7.3 million in funding. State Forestry is currently working through the B11 process for the increased G&A funding. We have also asked for a $10.1 million exception request for the 25-26 agency budget for G&A. The request is associated with the future project planning we're expecting to take on through our agreements, while also being able to take in project revenue from a portion of our projects, which are our timber sales. State Forestry has 1 full-time program coordinator and 3 year-round at-will G&A foresters located in the Black Hills, Medicine Bow Route, and Bridger-Teton National Forests. We also hire a seasonal forester for the Bighorn National Forest. Additionally, State Forestry utilizes our partnership forester position to complete G&A work for the Medicine Bow Route National Forest and BLM High Desert District. This position is a year-round at-will employee forester that is funded by state and federal funds and completes cross-boundary work on state, private, and federal lands. Statewide, State Forestry presently has 17 G&A timber sales and 6 G&A service contracts. Since the inception of the G&A program, State Forestry has contracted over 11,000 acres of projects on federal lands. We have sold about 32 million board feet of federal timber. Most of the timber sold under our timber contracts goes to local Wyoming industries. One of the biggest benefits of the G&A program is the fact that the timber revenue generated from these timber sales goes directly back into our agreements. This keeps the decision on how that revenue is spent shared between the local national forests and state forestry. We have been able to invest the revenue generated from our timber sales back into future management of Wyoming's national forests. Typically, Forest Service timber sale revenues go back to a shared Forest Service timber revenue account in DC and do not directly benefit our Wyoming forests. State forestry has also seen other benefits of the G&A program, such as helping to increase the pace and scale of on-the-ground projects on federal lands. In many cases, where these projects are occurring, there are adjacent state and private lands that can be managed as well. The implementation of large cross-boundary projects reduces the price per acre, has less administrative contracting costs, and secures more work for prospective contractors. Our state contracting system is flexible, it's manageable, and easier to administer for a contractor as well as a forester. We believe we are making progress in reducing fuels, improving the forest health, and watersheds within our federal forests. This positive impact is because of the support and efforts given to us from the Wyoming legislature through the Good Neighbor Authority revolving account. The proposed changes to the statute would increase 4 to 10 at-will employees is welcomed. We believe there are still areas to grow in this program in Wyoming, and providing us the ability to hire additional positions through our agreements is greatly appreciated. One challenge we have been facing is keeping the 3 G&A forester positions we depend on for year-round work filled. Because the positions are at-will contract employees, they offer no benefits to the foresters. We are having a hard time finding skilled foresters and keeping them in these positions, as we cannot compete with other states and federal agencies. So this turnover has resulted in us not being as effective, as we are having to rehire certain positions annually, retrain a new person, and trying to get the new forester to finish all the field work that needs to get completed within the season. Future consideration to the statute would be to increase the authority from 1 full-time position to 4, which would include the 3 year-round at-will positions that are already built into the long-term agreements. This would leave 7 at-will contract positions, which is still necessary as this program continues to grow. As the Wyoming State Forester, I want to thank this committee for their time and efforts in supporting the Good Neighbor Authority program. Wyoming's forests have benefited from the implementation of this program over the last several years, and that is in thanks to the coordination between our federal partners, state forestry, and Wyoming's legislature. I'll end my presentation here and open it up to any questions the chairman or committee members may have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Any questions for our state forester? Okay, well, you mentioned the B11 process, and so maybe you could just, give the committee a little bit of overview about how this program is, how that looks within your budget request. And because usually, and this is what we're talking about is, we have this statutory limitation on the number of employees you can have, which is odd, I guess you could say. Because usually we determine that through the budgeting process. And so I'm just wondering, is there a corresponding number in your budget that in addition to the statutory limitations we put on, and what does that look like?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's been evolving because this is such a new program, which has been part of our challenge, is we weren't sure how much to ask for. We looked at what agreements we were in the first 2 years we were thinking we were going to have. And out of that B11, what we've noticed is since there's been a surplus through the IRA and IIJA funding, we are getting projects at $3.5 million at a time coming to us, service contracts and items like that on certain forests, which then increases. We only have so much authority to have that amount of money and that's why we are going through the B11 process. And that's why we're asking to increase it an additional 10.1 million, is because of the fact that we're seeing so much need and desire from the Forest Service to invest in our agreements. We also are having revenue coming in at the same time, almost $1 million now And so to be able to have that revenue as well as take on new projects, we need to increase our authorities. Outside of that, we were given $400,000 extra dollars on the side that we have been using specifically in the last biennium. It was a footnote, I believe. And that is being used to help with the new employees the AWACS that we have been having, helping with supplies and items that the federal agencies, or it hasn't been in the agreements.
And follow up real quick, then I'll get to everybody. So the budget constraints, so we will limit the amount of even federal funds you get, right? Correct. It's not you're talking about increasing your budgeting for, you're not talking about state funds. It's how much we authorize to sit in that particular account. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Senator Kolb, then Co-Chairman Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Morning. Where might these 6 potential new employees live or contract employees live? Could you please explain, I guess, what your thoughts are? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, Senator, that's a great question. One area in particular we have not had a forester is the Shoshone National Forest. We now have a new assistant state forester who used to be actually one of our G&A foresters for the Black Hills, who is out of Riverton, as well as a new district forester. And we have plans to grow the Shoshone, where we believe there's quite a bit of work ahead of us there. Outside of that, we do believe that there's areas for growth on possibly UN to Wasatch Cache. There's areas for growth in conjunction with the BLM as well. And we'd like to have that ability. As we have these authorities, we can move forward with discussions in those agreements.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Norris, you mentioned the idea that you had to transition some of these at-will contract employees to FTEs, full-time employees. What would be the cost to the state if we did transition those to FTEs? Do you have that handy?
Mr. Chairman, so these are all fully paid by federal funds. So, and that's in the statute this way. So it would have to be completely funded by federal funds. And so we wouldn't be asking for state funding for any of these full-time positions.
So is that something that is within this committee's purview to be able to authorize those FTEs, or is that something that has to go through federal jurisdiction?
Mr. Chairman, from my understanding, the statute, that last line in the statute, it could just go from 1 full-time to 4 full-time. And that would give us the authority to work through with our agreements to get the funding up to the level we need to include benefits for those positions under our agreements.
Any further questions, committee? Okay, well, and like I said, I'm looking at that last sentence, starting on page 2, line 4, and going to line 7. And I can't think of any other instance in our statute where we make the decision in the statute. So if we were to just strike that last sentence altogether, the legislature would still have control over how many authorized positions we would have, how much the maximum authorized amount of federal funds in that account. It'd just be through the budget process, not in statute. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, cool. And once again, just to make sure we understand the program, this is technically a state position that helps deal with the federal bureaucracy. It streamlines our ability to harvest an important natural resource and manage the national forests, and as well as state and private land in a, dare I say, more competent manner.
That's correct.
Okay. And then so the correlation, I think, it was if you're familiar with our veteran service officers in the Wyoming Military Department, they help our veterans navigate the Veterans Affairs bureaucracy, for example. So it seems like it might be analogous to that. So, okay. Any further questions for our state forester? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Any public comment on this topic? Anybody online? Okay, nobody online? Last chance, going once, going twice. Public comment is closed. Committee, what's your pleasure? Okay, moved by Senator Ellis, second by Senator Kolb. Any discussion? Any amendments? I won't go page by page since it's about a paragraph long, so. Mr. Co-Chairman?
Mr. Chairman. So we have two thoughts or ideas about how to deal with the FTE versus a contract position. Striking that last few lines or changing on line 5 from 1 full-time employee position to 3, and then on line 6, decreasing the 10 down to 7. And I would propose an amendment to change, to actually leave this sentence in this bill and change that from 1 to 3 on line 5, 3 FTEs, and reduce on line 6 down to 7 at-will contract employees.
Okay, so we have an amendment here, committee.
Second.
Second by Senator Kolb. Any discussion on that?
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think another idea that we heard was also to just strike that sentence entirely and let the budgeting process sort that out. And so maybe for the bringer of the amendment, just some rationale of why you want to dictate it or keep that sentence in there and change those numbers as opposed to striking it. I'm just trying to make a decision here.
So,
Go ahead.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Ellis, through the budgeting process, we know how convoluted that can become as we try to increase FTEs. It becomes very difficult. But, we understand that this is federally paid. It's really no burden upon us as a state. So this authorizes our state forester to be able to go out and retain people without having to go through this actual budgeting process, because there's no budget for the state. It's all federally funded, is my understanding.
Any further discussion? Senator Kolb.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think to get to the good Senator Ellis's question, I think it helps me, and I think it'll help a lot of people to understand just how many people are engaged in this activity, because the amount of people directly relates to how they can execute, plan, and deal with our forests. So I think it's helpful to have a number there, because I like you kind of thought, well, why are we doing this at all? But I think at the end of the day, I thought about it a little more, and it seems more informative to people. And so they have a quicker and more easily understood, I guess, to the amount of employees that help us do what we'd like to do in the state of Wyoming. So that's why I'm still for this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further discussion on the amendment? Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. That motion carries. Any further discussion or amendments on this bill draft? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and do a roll call vote for committee sponsor.
Chairman?
Oh, go ahead, Senator Ellis.
Mr. Chairman, just so I'm making sure we understand this too, is the effective date appropriate, being July 1st with their budgeting cycle? I just want to make sure that it doesn't need to be effective. Do you know an answer to that?
I do not, but I'm sure the state forester could shed some light on that.
Mr. Chairman, we will make it work for however it works. Our agreements are specifically for those full-time positions are 10 to 20 years long. So we'll be just modifying those agreements with the salaries. And if possible, it might be great to go up to 4 full-time. So that would be the partnership one, and then the 3 from the Medbo route, the Black Hills, and the BT all as full-time.
All right, so
Thank you.
got an answer on the effective date and some more information. So any further discussion, committee, any further amendments? Mr. Co-Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, based on further testimony from their state forester, I would like to to make another amendment to change that to 4 FTEs and 6 at-will contracting positions.
Okay, so we heard it's been moved and seconded to strike the 3 and insert 4 for full-time employees and strike the 7 and insert 6 for that will.
And Mr.
Go ahead.
Chairman, we've heard through testimony, this is federal money. And it's so difficult to get people without benefits. We realize this. At will contract employees, it's hard to retain good employees. We need to provide some benefits because long-term, 10 to 20 years, people need those kind of assurances that their benefits will be covered so that they can stay and create additional value with longevity. So I think that's important that if there's no cost to the state, let's try to retain some of these employees.
Any further discussion on the amendment? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. That motion carries. Any further discussion, Senator Ellis?
Mr. Chairman, I would move to, on page, is it 2? Or page 1, change the effective date on line 9 to effective immediately.
Second.
Okay, moved by Senator Ellis, seconded by Representative Heiner to make an immediate effectively. Any discussion on that amendment?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Senator.
just an explanation. I know we heard that they could make this work, but it just seems like this would give them the benefit of being able to recruit and actually hire someone before the summer season starts when they can actually get in there and start doing some work.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. That motion carries. So we'll have an immediate effective date. Any further discussion on the bill draft? Okay, seeing none, let's go ahead and do a roll call vote.
Mr. Chairman, this is a roll call vote to sponsor 24 LSO 120 State Forestry Good Neighbor positions as amended. Senator Ellis,
Aye.
Senator Kolb,
Aye.
Representative Tarver.
Aye.
Representative Winter. Co-Chairman Heiner,
Aye.
Chairman Boner.
Aye.
That passes.
All right, very good. We're on to our 9:30 topic, a little bit early. Well, before we do, any further discussion on this topic? Nope, we're good. All right, so far so good. Off to a good start. Okay. Wild horse update. We have representatives from the BLM. Feel free to come on down. This is at the request or had a request at our last meeting. And certainly I understood you did a good update at our first meeting, but I just want to see how everything's going. Looks like this is a rapidly evolving area and look forward to hearing what you all have to share with us. Just as a reminder, please introduce yourself for the record and please proceed with your testimony.
Representative Boner and Chairman Boner, Chairman Heiner, and the rest of the subcommittee, I really appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to you today. Before I get started, I would really like to have my colleagues introduce themselves. And before I do that, Andrew Archuleta, I'm the State Director for BLM Wyoming.
Jennifer Flair McConkey, Deputy State Director of Resources for BLM Wyoming.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Chris Kirby, Associate State Director for BLM Wyoming.
Chairman Boner, Chairman Heiner, and members of the subcommittee. As you know, we manage the Wild Horse and Burro program under the 1971 Wild Horses and Burro Act. And I'm going to cover just a little bit of background because I want to come back to that in a little bit. But, it's only one of the many resources that we manage under our multiple use mission. And also one of the really important resources that we manage, across the Western states. But, we try to manage the numbers of wild horses in balance with what the habitat can support. And as you all know, we struggle with that in a big way for a lot of different reasons, which we'll get into a little bit here. In Wyoming, we have 16 wild horse management areas. In terms of numbers of wild horses, we are second behind Nevada in terms of the total of numbers of wild horses that BLM manages. Those 16 HMAs are on about 5 million acres of land. And 4 of the 16 HMAs overlap the checkerboard area in the southwestern part of the state, which creates additional challenges, as you're all aware of. We estimate that currently in BLM, we have about 88 here in Wyoming, we have about 8,800 wild horses out on the land. That's about 5,000 over what we believe the high appropriate management level to be. So, obviously we see the impact on the land, and we see the impact that it has on ranchers, and in a lot of different ways, we struggle with our ability to manage the horses in the way that the Wild Horse and Burro Act allows for it. The act itself is only about 4 pages long, and if you've never read it, I would encourage you to do so. It really does provide us with all the tools to manage horses and keep them down at the level that we think is appropriate. However, very often, we're not allowed through congressional intent or decisions that don't allow us to sell horses in the way we would, or use some of the methods that are available in the act. 2 weeks ago, I spent an entire day out on the Post-on Ranch there outside of Riverside. It's within the Northlander complex, and definitely saw for myself and heard from a couple of ranchers the impact that it's having on their livelihood out there, and to see the impact on the ground. And so, I understand the impact that number of horses are having, and not just on them, but also on the native wildlife, on sage grouse, on elk and deer winter range. So definitely an issue that we need to deal with. As you're all aware of, we released the Rock Springs Wild Horse and Burro recorded decision in early May. And it was great because we went a whole day without getting sued on that. But then 2 days later, we did get sued on it. So it is in litigation. But the point is that in that decision, we are attempting to deal with some of the checkerboard area and the difficulty that we have there. The purpose of that, or the intent of that record of decision, was to address some of the issues in the consent decree that we had with the Rock Springs Grazing Association and the litigation that they had filed a few years ago. So specifically within that plan, the Great Divide Basin, the Salt Wells Creek HMAs would revert to herd management areas where we would zero out the wild herd population eventually. And portion of the Adobe Town HMA, which is right there on the state line, would also revert to a herd area, and we would zero that one out as well. And then portions of the rest of the HMAs would remain as is, with the intent of getting them down to appropriate management level. It's important to remember that decision is really a management decision. It doesn't make on the ground decisions to do specific roundups or specific gathers. Is really our intent on how we would like to manage that area. But as I said, currently under litigation. Just want to express nationally, BLM is working on a strategy, and I'm not one to really say that every problem requires money, but this is one that we are falling short with funding in a big way. Nationally, we've all kind of thought of 100,000 horses out there on the range as kind of being that threshold of kind of losing total control, if you will. Well, right now we're at about 82,000 horses out there. So we're approaching that 100,000 level fairly quickly. In order to bring that number down, we believe we would need to remove 20,000 horses a year. And this is all the Western states that have wild horse and burros. So right now we are working on that here in Wyoming and in every other state as the goal to remove 20,000 horses this year. 20,000 horses costs about, in order to remove and to care for, about $220 million for a year. We have about 175 million nationally. We are close to just under 50 million short to do that. So every state right now, state BLM is combing through their budget to identify money that we can put towards the Wild Horse and Burro program. So what's the impact? That's not the only thing we manage. So we pull money away from recreation or grazing or oil and gas. I will definitely hear from those groups as well. And so it is a balancing act, but it is also a priority for us as well as we approach that bigger threshold. We had we just are in the middle of the comment period for NEPA on the McCullough Peaks bait trap gather. And the McCullough Peaks is not a big herd, and it's one we've been pretty successful using PZP to maintain the level. And really, we were looking at only removing 41 horses through a bait trap. It's really been interesting. Somebody got a hold of my email address, and I think as of this morning, I have close to 10,000 emails over the last week opposing a bait gather, which is really non-intrusive and really a pretty simple process. We also were so out there on Yellowstone Road, we were surprised to see a billboard come up about that bait gather, just to show you the emotion. And maybe some of you saw that. But one of the groups took out a billboard ad, a couple of different ones, and just opposing that bait trap gather. And so you can imagine when we go to 41 horses bait trap, when we go to remove 2,000 using a drive trap, the emotions that come out and the reaction that we got. So, just a reminder, and I know all know the difficulty in this whole program, but in addition to, the 16 HMAs that we manage, we also have 10 different contract long-term holding and short-term holding facilities. And, really appreciate the ability to work with partners, getting horses trained or gentled, if you will, which makes them a little easier to adopt. And this year we adopted about just over 500 horses here in Wyoming. So hard at it trying to get that done. As you might know, we are not able to sell horses that are under 10 years old unless we have failed to adopt them 3 times. And so it takes a lot of effort to even get to the point where we're able to actually sell a horse. So with that, I think I'm going to close it. I appreciate the time to just pass on to you where we are with the Wild Horse and Burro program. Always a struggle, always a challenge, and opportunities abound. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Director. Appreciate you all being here. Any questions, committee? Mr. Co-Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Archuleta, thank you for being here. I'm sure you sometimes feel like a politician, no matter what you do, but somebody's going to be unhappy with the outcome. And I appreciate the BLM is, I know you're trying to do what is best for the land and for the people and the public lands. There's been a lot of discussion and exposure to the Rock Springs area with the new resource management plan, but it's silent on the wild horse issue. Do you anticipate with the preferred alternative that the wild horse numbers target will change, or will it stay the same under the consent decree?
Chairman Boner, Chairman Heiner, the reason it's silent, that plan is silent on wild horses is because we did a specific wild horse and burro management plan for the Rock Springs office. It's also silent on sage grouse for that same reason with the plan amendment coming out. So, the intent is that we would reduce numbers out there within the Rock Springs field office based on the Rock Springs and Rawlins decision, assuming we get past the litigation here. So the Rock Springs resource management plan doesn't directly affect wild horses.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Director. I appreciate that answer. As a follow-up, we've seen what's happened on the reservation as they have removed wild horses, and I'm sure you're very aware of the rebound from the elk and the sage grouse, how quickly that came back as those wild horses were removed from the reservation. I'm sure you have a lot of opportunities to pass on good news such as that to Washington. Would you commit to sharing that with Washington, that it does improve the environment when we reduce the wild horse numbers and the damage that they're causing? And this in the reservation is a good example how we can help the problem.
Chairman Boner, Chairman Heiner, definitely information we have passed on, and yeah, the results are impressive. And not to downplay that at all. The tribes are able to do some things that we are not, and really trying to connect with the tribes and see how we might work with them. But yeah, they are able to do sales that we are not, which makes it a little bit easier to move the horses. But nonetheless, the result is impressive.
Senator Cole.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Archuleta, I guess I have a broader question. After listening to the conversation a little bit, has there been conversations about the conflicts between different species of animals that you range and manage, sage grouse to wild horses? And is there anybody looking at this in totality instead of, I mean, you do the wild horses and someone else does sage grouse, or what, there are other groups, I assume, that do this, but are there active conversations about, I don't know, for lack of a better word, playing God between animal species and in wanting everybody to be a winner, when obviously not everyone's going to be a winner under these circumstances? I mean, what goes on there? Could you, I guess, help me out to understand in a broader way that particular topic? Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yep. Go ahead, Director.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Cole, when we focus on impact and habitat degradation, I mean, that's the focus, really, not the species. Then you kind of back up from there and look at, how is that impact affecting species? And obviously one of the primary species right now for us is the greater sage grouse, and not because, we think the sage grouse reigns out there, but there's a lot of advantages to other species if we can protect the habitat that the sage grouse depends on, and keep it from being listed, quite frankly. But we see that the impact to other species, to especially winter range with elk and with mule deer. When I was on the Poisson Ranch, it was pretty obvious the horses actually get ahead of the cows as they're moving cattle across the range, and by the time the cows get there, there's not a lot left. So there's not a lot left for deer and elk either. And so, that's pretty important winter range for both those species in an area that was hit pretty hard by snow last year. So we've put various species in a pretty difficult situation, with just limiting the habitat that's available. Obviously, some years we're going to have die off just naturally. But, I don't know that we BLM are not trying to place one species above another. And the Wild Horse and Burro Act, in fact, talks about managing wild horses and burros, wild horses specifically here in Wyoming, manage them in concert with the other species and with the habitat. And so, when we, unfortunately, different legislation drives the different management of different species, specifically horses. And so it's just a struggle to keep that balance that you're talking about and not overemphasize a particular species. Jennifer, do you want to add to that at all?
Go ahead.
This follow-up. Well, I think you need to pick a species. I mean, if testimony is that the greater sage grouse, if we benefit them, it benefits many other species, then why wouldn't we? I mean, we're trying to be, I don't know. I understand you're torn 1,000 ways with 1,000 different points of view, but in particular, frankly, I need you to stand up to what you believe is right for management. And if sage grouse managing that in a better way affects many other species in a more positive way, then I'm afraid the horses lose. And I just see them as being detrimental. And I hear you trying to struggle with this. And my question really was focusing around the idea, are there real conversations across the BLM about what I just was speaking about horses being destructive and in many, many ways, and invasive in many, many ways? That what the heck are we doing about this? And sure. I would like to hear from you. Maybe I explained myself a little bit better, but thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Director.
Chairman Bonner, Senator Kolb. So those discussions are happening in very regularly, very often, in a very intense way right now, because we're approaching that threshold that I was talking about earlier. And so we are actively looking at what tools do we have available to remove some horses off of the range. We are we're working on a national strategy, but quite honestly, it comes down to budget in order not just budget to remove horses, but budget to care for the horses because the holding costs have increased substantially over the last few years. And so holding, we can get them off the range, but then holding them until we can adopt them or move them off to permanent range is a, very expensive undertaking. And, $220 million for a year to remove 200 or 20,000 horses across the BLM is pretty substantial. And so we are actively working on that as an agency, budget wise, as well as authority wise. So to answer your question, yes, those conversations are happening.
And maybe just a quick follow-up, and then we'll get to representative. But so it seems like you have adjusted AML recently, and maybe could you just step through that process, what that looks like? And maybe that'll help with some of the senator's questions.
I'm sorry, Chairman Boner, you said, repeat the question.
It seems like you have made some adjustments to the appropriate management level in some herd management areas. If I misunderstand that, please correct me, but maybe you could step through what that process looks like. How you adjust numbers of your target numbers in a particular area for wild horses.
Sure. I'm going to allow Jennifer to answer that question.
Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, recently the Rock Springs and Rollins RMPs were amended to adjust appropriate management levels of the horses. And that was done based on the habitat out there, the monitoring data we have that supports the appropriate management level, but also this one was also done in response to the consent decree and the numbers of horses in the checkerboard that we were worked out with the Rock Springs Grazing Association allowed to have on the checkerboard. We have adjusted them to remove the checkerboard pieces from those HMAs, and in some cases had to revert to HAs because the amount of BLM acreage left over wasn't enough to support those HMAs.
So it sounds like a combination of, circumstances on the ground with habitat, and also you have to have somebody initiate the process, an outside group in that particular case.
In that particular case, yes.
Okay. All right. Cool. Representative Turner.
Thanks, sir. Director, just listening to this, and I'm a new legislator and trying to figure this out. This reminds me of ROIs, rules of engagement, and the government's really good at this. We want you to go to war, but you can't shoot until blah, 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 and et cetera, et cetera. So my question is the Burroughs Act. Did you guys have control of the wild horses at some point? And when did it change? Why did it change? And if you did have control of them at some point, I would really like to know the change that was made. And why don't we just go back and adjust that change, if so? Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Chairman Boner, Representative Tarver. So I would say, yes, at some point we did have control of the numbers, and there are two, maybe more tools that were removed from the toolbox over the years. One was the ability to euthanize horses that when we were over AML or felt like, we can euthanize horses for health reasons, but the Wild Horse and Burro Act actually provides the authority to euthanize horses when you're not able to sell or adopt and you're removing them because you're over capacity. We're no longer allowed to do that. The second is large sales. Like I said before, we can't sell a horse that's under 10 years old unless we have tried to adopt it 3 times, which requires quite a bit of effort and investment of time and money in order to get to that point to sell a horse. So that's the other big impact. We were talking about the Wind River Reservation and the tribe's ability there. They're able to sell those horses, and they're almost paying for the cost of removal. When we remove those horses, because we can't do a large sale like that, we have to hold them. And so then we incur an additional cost. And so that's also impacting our budget just to remove horses in the first place. So those are probably the 2 biggest things that have impacted our ability to manage the horses out there. And I've had conversations with our congressionals about those issues, and that's kind of where we're at. I failed to mention one thing here in Wyoming. And across the BLM, we are updating our gather schedule. We do have 3 gathers planned this year. One is McCullough Peaks, which I mentioned earlier. We have reinitiated the Northlander removal, which hoping to do in the spring, and then the White Mountain area as well. So we do have 3 gathers planned. I will be honest with you, we don't have the money to care for those horses. We do have the money to care for them. We don't have the money to maintain them long-term and holding. And so that's, we are taking a risk there because we believe it's an issue. Like Senator Cole mentioned, we got to do something, and we're approaching a threshold that none of us want to cross. So.
Well, Representative.
Thank you, sir. So basically, they've taken away your tools to manage the horses properly. They've taken away the money for you to manage the horses properly. And now we're impacting other species through you not being able to do your job properly. So I'm not really seeing the solution here. Basically, everything that you need to do your job, they've taken away. Am I missing something here? This makes absolutely no sense. And you're going to gather them that you can afford to do. We're going to put them in holding pens that you can't afford to do. So at a certain date, we just turn them back out and start this process over again. We can't adopt them all out because the folks can't afford it. That won't work. So is there anything else? I mean, I assume you've exhausted all of your ideas and resources, and I'd love to help. I think we'd all love to help, but what can we do?
Director.
Chairman Boner, Representative Tarver, I think you summarized it very well. We're in a difficult spot right now. We are trying to identify additional pipelines for adoptions. East Coast, for example, a lot of people interested in horses out on the East Coast. At some point, that market would probably become saturated as well. But right now, we feel there is a market there. We're working on, obviously, to transport horses from out here to the East Coast, you got to be able to take some stops along the way, and we're trying to set up that pipeline, if you will. There are a few other countries interested in adopting horses. Border Patrol and other law enforcement entities, some of the cities who have mounted patrols are interested in adopting, but we're talking fairly small markets when we look at the number of horses there. So we are looking at every possible avenue because it's approaching that crisis level. So.
Sorry, Director, follow up there. And we'll get to Representative Moore. You said other countries.
Yes.
Can you explain that a little bit?
Just other, there are just, whether it be groups or entities in other countries are aware of our wild horse issue and the number of wild horses that we have on the range, and there have been some adoptions to other countries in the past. I should explain that a little bit better because we are not allowed to. I don't want to infer other countries as in Canada or Mexico or countries that slaughter horses, because it's specific in our amended legislation that we're not allowed to do that. No other countries that would use them for recreational purposes or pets or whatever.
Right. It's my understanding that there's some sort of follow-up after you adopt them out to ensure that, that those requirements are being complied with. And so how would that work if it's another country? You may lack jurisdiction to follow up, I guess.
That's a good question that I'm not totally informed on, maybe.
Okay, well, interesting. Well, we learn something every day in this community, so I appreciate you sharing that. Representative Winter, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, I know you have a system for counting horses, but has the BLM utilized the what's called the infrared system? And is that having any kind of a change in the numbers that you're seeing out there?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Winter, yes, we have used infrared in the past couple of years, especially over the Northlander area, and it is improving the accuracy of our counts.
Well, thank you. But have you seen any difference in the numbers that you've previously counted versus what you've counted with the infrared?
I'll have to get back to you on that one. I'm not sure, but they are improving our accuracy. So I would assume that, yes, we are seeing differences in the numbers that we had previously versus now using infrared.
Okay. I have another question too. Relative to the natural resource plan there in Rock Springs, it's my understanding that one of the ideas is to reduce the grazing AUMs out there for livestock in favor of the wild horses and putting these horses over on White Mountain. And so I have a real concern about that after having looked at the range out there on White Mountain. It's really in tough shape anyway. And then taking away livestock grazing just for the benefit of the horses doesn't really make a lot of sense either. So can you comment on that, please?
Chairman Bonner, Representative Winter, you know, when we are reducing AUMs on the range, it's typically because of the range condition, not because of one species or the other. I'm not suggesting that we don't ever reduce AUMs, and in fact we have proposed that in a few areas, but we've got to get the number of horses down so that we can maintain the level of grazing for livestock, for cattle that we had intended. I'm not gonna try to make that look rosy or anything. We're trying to protect the habitat out there, and there's a lot of impact from horses right now, and we just got to figure that one out. I don't have a good explanation for you there beyond that.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Cole?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question, I guess clarification or maybe edification from my point of view. These rules changes say you have to try to adopt wild horses 3 times before you take any further actions. Are these real legislation that was passed by Congress, or is this a rule-making authority that you may be exercising within your own organization? I guess I'd like some clarity on that, because it's always confusing to me is where these, I don't know, these new procedures, rules come from. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Chairman Bonner, Senator Kolb, that's a really good question, and I don't know the answer, but I will follow up and we'll get back to you on that one for sure. That's in our policy, but I don't know that it came from legislation, but we will follow up.
Is it possible, Director, that Congress put a limitation in their budget process, a rider that, even though the statute, says you can do X, Y, and Z, the Congress says actually don't do Z. I seem to remember hearing something about that, and I don't understand their budget process all that well, but does that ring a bell at all?
That's my guess, is that it's a rider on our budget bill, but I don't know that for sure, but we'll follow up for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Archuleta, it concerns me that you're using some funds for recreation and other purposes to supplement the budget for your wild horse program. That's concerning. So, Director, could you tell us how many wild horses are actually in captivity right now, and what the annual cost is for that, just maintaining that holding facility for them?
Let me feel for Wyoming. Yeah. My God. Chairman Bonner, Representative Heiner, we don't have that number specifically, but we can get it for you. But just knowing what our capacity is out there between Rock Springs, 2 training facilities, and really the big ones. What's the other one? Yeah, Wheatland. My guess is we have about 4,000 horses in captivity right now. And the annual cost is not 5 million. Yeah, we're guessing probably 5 million for the year to care for those horses. And those are rough. We do have those numbers, and we can definitely provide that information to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, as you get that number, could you also give us the holistic nationwide cost for a holding facility and how many you have there and what the cost is?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Any further questions, committee? Go ahead, Representative.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. There is a solution here. The Indians seem to have figured out how to take care of them. We just need to have a horse drive to the Indian reservation, and I think your problem will go away.
Okay. Go ahead, Senator Ellis. Okay,
Mr. Chairman, maybe we can refer to them as the tribes.
all right, fair enough. Yep. Okay, very good. Any further questions on wild or feral horses? I think a lot of people started calling feral horses. I do believe that's a little bit more accurate because it's not as if they're all descended from, Spanish conquistadors or could be dropped off at any point there by who knows who. So, any further questions? Okay, I have one last one before we move on. We just talked about Good Neighbor Authority here with the Forest Service. Is there any possibility? I know it probably hasn't been done before, but could we look at a similar arrangement with wild horses where perhaps we use that Good Neighbor Authority to cut through a little red tape? Just a question, maybe you don't have the answer right now, but I think something that certainly some folks have been discussing back and forth and could be an avenue we could potentially explore. Does anybody have a response to that?
Chairman Boner, Co-Chairman Heiner, we are looking into that. We have been asked that question. My understanding is that we can use the Good Neighbor Authority to, facilitate gathering of the horses. However, the same rules would still apply to those horses, and we would still have to find holding capacity and holding funds to care for them until they're either adopted or moved on.
Right. Okay, then one more, I promise. Previously we had, discussed the possibility of what the state can do to help, with, improve the, I guess the capacity, for lack of a better word, in terms of, getting horses adopted or finding a permanent home for them, similar to what the Honor Farm does in Riverton. Those inmates work with the horses, get them ready to be adopted out and have, very successful program. Any other ideas the state, how the state of Wyoming could help out with? I think that's a very positive example, very positive collaboration, but certainly just a drop in the bucket compared to the overall challenge. So any further ideas? I think Representative Tarver asked you once, I'll ask you again, what can we do to help?
Chairman Boner and members of the subcommittee, cost is always an issue and Good Neighbor Authority is a great way that we're able to share costs across the line with the state here in Wyoming, and we could make it work for horses as well. The care of the horses is a significant expense, and that's, pulling money away from what we had previously identified for gathers. And it's a three-pronged problem. You got to gather them, care for them, and adopt them. And we understand that, but any area where we could work with the state to care for the horses or to improve our adoption process, we definitely would be interested in talking about.
Okay, thank you very much. Senator Cole.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Archuleta, is there anything that would preclude the state of Wyoming from back funding the monies that, say, the federal government has precluded to fund you in their budget for, this requirement that you have wild horses, try to adopt them for three attempts to adopt a horse before you take the next step? Is there something in law that precludes the state of Wyoming from funding the operation that the federal government is not funding? If that's an impediment to what you're doing, can that be done? That's my open-ended question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman Boner, Senator Kolb, to my knowledge, no, there's no restriction there, no impediment. I believe the state of Colorado is going to be funding some piece of BLM Colorado's wild horse program this year for the first time. So I don't believe so. I think, that's something that we could work out, if the state felt compelled to do that.
Yeah, just follow up, Mr. Chairman. I think what I personally, after listening to this testimony, I think I'm compelled to believe that us funding the, a program that has a cost sideboards when it comes to housing these animals in perpetuity. I mean, theirs seems like the largest cost here, because that's holding up everything. You lack the funds, you lack the facilities, you lack everything in that regard, because there's no off ramp for these horses. So that was my thoughts, but interested in what you might come up with on a plan to move forward to maybe help the situation. Director, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, any further comments on this topic? Okay. Senator Kolb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I guess I couldn't let this go by without talking about the Rock Springs Resource Management Plan. And I brought up something in a prior meeting that I didn't have all the information I had partial information and it wasn't all accurate. So you had asked for some more specifics and I have. So indeed, in the Rock Springs Resource, the BLM office, Rock Springs Field Office, they did issue a ticket. I have the citation number here. It's a violation number 9437771. And it in fact quoted 13 CFR 8341.1 F and 4. And it was issued on 9/10/23. And there is a court date without a place for it to go to the court date. So the person who was cited found out that it's December 15th of 23 but yet no court to appear in. It's just that's the date. I can assure you I drove out there after that last conversation we had, looked at it myself. Well, the BLM duly erected 2 signs on said 2-track road at the beginning of the 2-track. One sign said you can turn somebody in and get $200. And the other sign said, no, this road has been closed and it's a $200 fine. And they were both in each track of the 2 tracks. And they did not exist prior to the issuance of that citation. There's a lot of confusion about this here locally. There's everyone's, I guess, who's talked to Ms. Kimberly Foster and I don't know what the truth is about this, but I will assure you there's been a citation issued, a court date issued for a road that was not closed until they erected said closed placards up. I don't know what you'd call those things officially. So I just, I like to know what's going on here. I mean, my constituent got ticketed for driving on a road, which is a clear 2-track road. And I have pictures of it if anyone wants to see it. I went out there myself in my side-by-side, did not go by those 2 BLM closed signs. And on top of all this, the said BLM ranger drove across said prairie to get to my constituent, drove across it and then cited him, in fact, for driving on a closed road because you're going to damage the forage, the grasses, I think it says in that CFR. So I know you said before you're going to get back to many things, but it hasn't happened. So I guess I'd like to hear your thoughts on what I just explained with more specificity on this issue. If you could help me with that, Director. Thank you.
Okay, so feel free to answer however you like. And understand you're maybe more prepared to talk about this, but it is something that's brought up before, and I think it's really important. As we deal with a lot of turmoil in the Rock Springs field office. So feel free to answer whatever you'd like.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Kolb, thank you. I wrote down the citation number. I do remember this discussion at our previous session, and I don't believe we had a citation number, so I did write that down. We will follow up. Do you know which road, or is there a common name of that road that would help us as well?
Common name of the road? No, they just gave a longitude and latitude. I mean, I could share this with you. I mean, the handwriting of said ranger was not the greatest. So it took me a bit. I actually have a I actually have navigation systems on my side by side that I logged a picture with longitude and latitude, the time of day. So it'd be very accurate. I can share that with you. Like I said, that number, I remember trying to figure it out. Because I was trying to find it when I was driving out there to find out exactly where he was when that ticket was issued. And it was further up the road than I was actually physically at because they put the road closure information right where you'd turn right in the direction that I was turning on. So I could supply that to you. I apologize for not having that prepared. I guess I thought I had enough and I was wrong. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you. Senator, be careful, you might get a ticket yourself. You tried that Latin long there, but that's.
Well, just to follow up on that fact, I drove around that whole area. It's around 3 patches in an area where I happen to live. And there had roads that were almost identical. I mean, I'd say indistinguishable from the road that person got a ticket on. And he had no idea. He's not a person that, runs around violating the law. My constituents generally are law-abiding people. And, but I think it's just absolutely unfair that he gets a citation for driving on a road that was not closed. And then said person who gives him citation actually trucks across the prairie, causes innumerable more damage than he ever dreamed of supposedly causing. And so here I sit with my constituents going, well, what the heck is going on here? So I'm sorry, I took the opportunity to speak to you about this. I realize it's off topic, but I thought it was important that I'd follow up on this. And you understand that the public is very upset over this. And because things have changed, let's be clear, they have changed. And I'd like to know what basis they're doing what they're doing now. So anyway, thank you for listening to me.
Okay, any further questions or comments? Okay, thank you all for being here. Appreciate it. And we'll definitely keep up the communication. So. Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and just take a 10-minute break, get back at 10 a.m., be right on schedule. We'll hear from our Attorney General, among others. All right, we're back. We're at our 10 o'clock topic, talking about federal litigation. We have Wyoming Attorney General Bridget Hill with us. Welcome, ma'am, and feel free to introduce yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I am Bridget Hill. I am the Wyoming Attorney General. I have with me today David DeWald. He's the deputy of my Water and Natural Resources Division. I think you saw him last time when I was unable to attend. But he comes today because the work of our litigation against the federal government is primarily in his division. My understanding of why or the topic you wanted me to address here today was what you could do or what the legislature could do to support the AG's office regarding federal litigation, including our staffing levels, our workload, and our pay. So the first thing I would want to start with would be to let you know that both of our HB 300 positions are in fact filled right now. So we do have attorneys in those positions, and those are the positions that traditionally undertake our federal litigation, or at least our federal litigation when it's concerned with natural resources. And so both of those positions are filled, and so the attorneys we have traditionally looked to undertake these cases are in place. And so that is good news in terms of our federal natural resource litigation. But it is true that my office is experiencing fairly significant vacancies. And this would include other positions within our Water and Natural Resource Division. Primarily right now, those vacancies would be in the area of our attorneys that represent the DEQ. Now, that is also an area where we undertake a certain amount of litigation. And as you know, the EPA is very busy right now with the things that it is doing, and some of them are contrary to what we believe to be the interests of Wyoming. So that is an area of concern. But it is a bigger concern than just the Water and Natural Resources Division. It is an office-wide concern. In the past 2 years, I've experienced a vacancy rate anywhere from 8 to 20% within my office and the attorneys within my office. That isn't including that vacancy rate is just for attorneys that I'm giving you. I have other vacancy concerns. Obviously, as you know, I have DCI and the Law Enforcement Academy, et cetera, in there, but I was focusing for today simply on my attorneys. So it is an office-wide problem. I would note it's also a state government-wide program or problem. You see a similar vacancy rate in the district attorney's offices and the public defender's offices. So it's an attorney problem. I think you also see a similar issue throughout the state. Recently, there was an article within the Wyoming Lawyer, so that's the publication that the bar puts out, and it spoke about attorneys and the possible lack of attorneys in the state. And the takeaway from those articles was you see a significant increase in the demand for attorneys within Wyoming right now, while you have a significant decrease in the supply. So basic economic principles at play there. The thing that I recall specifically from those articles was they reached out to the Career Services Center at the University of Wyoming to see what their insight on it was. And I specifically remember their data was they are now posting close to 700 available positions, attorney positions in the state of Wyoming, where they used to post 200. So those are the kind of numbers that we are talking about right now in terms of finding attorneys within Wyoming to fill attorney vacancies. So there's increased competition for quality attorneys to fill the positions within my office. So we have, recognizing that, we have undertaken some efforts of our own to try to increase the visibility of our office and the attractiveness of our office and state government employees. Obviously, we interact with the law school. We have two clinics that we're associated with. One that would be of interest to you would be our natural resource clinic. We've undertaken the responsibility for running that clinic, and that is to get lawyers in the state interested in natural resource law and recognizing that state government is a great place to practice natural resource law. So we are working on that. And then of course we try to increase our visibility going over there. Those are younger attorneys, but I think that helps the problem long-term. We also, as I think you would know, when you look in my budget, we also take on interns every summer, trying to increase our visibility there. Some work in Mr. DeWald's division, other work within other divisions in my office. And we had a great experience last summer. And the attorney that interned, or the student that interned for us last summer in the Water and Natural Resource Division, is very interested in joining our office. So some of those experiences are, I think, helping to contribute to solving the problem within the Attorney General's office. But when you think about long-term, how are we going to solve this problem? How are we going to get better with this problem? Obviously, an important topic would be to assure that we are paying a competitive salary within the state government for attorney work. And in that regard, I want to start off the top by saying thank you for the support that was already given for the employee pay raises that have happened in the last 2 years. So those have been tremendously important, and they have been tremendously helpful. And so attorneys in my office were the recipients of some of those pay raises. And so I want to express our gratitude for that support. It contributes to helping with the problem. And so those came in 2 rounds, those employee raises. And so if I were to pinpoint something that could be helpful at this point, it would be to support any further requests that the governor might make in this regard. I don't know what those are, or if there are any, but those have been helpful. Excuse me. And so what I would ask for support for those. They've been very, very, very beneficial, and we are very appreciative of that. So please don't understand anything I say after this to not be appreciative of that. Now, when those raises were implemented, though, those pay raises were based in part on market pay rates as established by the Department of A&I. Now, when that second round of raises were implemented and the market pay rates were established, what we saw was the pay tables for attorneys actually go down. And so the band of pay that we were able to pay attorneys in the state at this time, where you have increased demand for attorneys, actually went down. Now, I was not the only, profession to experience. It was very few, that phenomenon, but nurses also went down. So that's a problem that has to be addressed. But we're here to talk about federal litigation. So attorneys went down, nurses went down. I think there was one other, maybe executives in a certain class, but only a few of those market pay rates went down, which was harmful in terms of my ability to pay more. It didn't harm immediately my people because there was a merit component to those pay raises. My attorneys did receive pay raises. But what a lower pay scale means is it injures my ability to recruit and retain attorneys. They look at those pay bands and understand where the salary may or may not go when they are making decisions based on their employment. So the good news is we were able to work a little bit with the governor's office, the budget office, and A&I to get us an additional little bit of flexibility and additional budgeting money from that using already established processes. So we are working to address that immediately. And again, this isn't just an attorney general's problem. This would be for all attorneys within the state system. So that is something we are working on. Additionally, a thing that we are working on right now is we're engaging with A&I to undertake what they call an attorney market pay study. It is my understanding that the next study that they will undertake at A&I is the attorney market pay study. So what that means is we are working within the state system as it has been established both by statutes and by rules for paying employees within the state to get that addressed. During that study, we will look at the market pay rates to both understand what drives the market and if we are looking at the right market for the attorney pay study. And we will be looking at if there are additional markets we should be looking at. For instance, the federal government, the pay they do, our regional states. Some of those are helpful, but some of them are not. And we're wondering if they should be included. And some are not helpful in terms of what their office does. There's some states surrounding us that don't do a lot of their work in-house. They contract out a lot of their work. And so that doesn't equally work together then when you're looking at market pay rates. You have maybe apples and oranges there. So that will be a primary focus in trying to sort that out within the state and understand the current demand pressures that I've already spoken about. So what that means in my appearance before you today would be, I don't have a specific request for you here today regarding attorney pay. Because what we're doing is working within the state system to, one, collect the data, and two, better understand what is driving those rates. So what I would like to do, or at least alert you to, once those efforts are complete, we may have a request for you. But I don't have a request at this time because I'd like to understand that and have the data to back up whatever request I might have for the legislature regarding attorney pay. And so that's the situation we are in terms of attorney pay and collecting the data for that. So we may make specific requests in the future to you. In the meantime, I will keep up my efforts to, excuse me, I will keep up my efforts to decrease my vacancy rate and to have attorneys on staff to work on this important work. We recognize it's important. I thought of a few other things then that I would note might be helpful with regard to federal litigation that I would mention now. One would be obviously support FNRPA, which you have. And I would note through FNRPA, we have not had any problems undertaking the federal litigation that we have wanted to undertake. And that's because of FNRPA. Because FNRPA is in place, and additionally because the coal litigation is in, funding is in place, we believe we're well positioned to undertake any federal litigation that may come. So we would ask for your continued support of FNRPA and whatever budget requests the governor's office may have related to FNRPA. I don't know what those are and if there are any, but I would say that that funding is a very important source of funding, not only for funding my attorneys, but the important part of FNRPA is it helps fund some of what I like to call the front end work. So the engagement with the federal government when it's appropriate, that is helpful, one, for maybe getting the outcome you like before you go to litigation, but it's also helpful in terms of creating a proper record in the event we need to go to litigation. So my ask of the legislature would be to support FNRPA and any possible requests that the governor's office might make related to FNRPA. The second then would be to recognize that we do work with the governor's office to prioritize what federal litigation we are going to undertake. I do think it's important to focus on the most important cases in terms of Wyoming's interests and our chances of success of altering the outcome for those. It's that old adage you've heard, if everything's important, nothing's important. And I think that applies a little bit in federal litigation as well. that we need to prioritize what those are. And I think we've done a good job doing that with regard to our interactions with the governor's office and undertaking the federal litigation that we all see as very important. The second thing that does in terms of making sure that we're pursuing the most important cases and the cases where we could actually alter the outcome is, I think it helps from, and I don't have a better term for this, so I'll just call it what I've been calling it. It prevents us from diluting our brand. If we're suing over every little thing, at some point that becomes noise that in a lot of ways dilutes your brand in terms of Wyoming. And I apply this not only in the federal resource litigation arena, but in other things that my office undertakes. I want it to be noted on some issues that if Wyoming's there, it's because it's important. And that is why we're there. And so recognize that we prioritize. And then the third one here would be just my office is having to exercise this. And honestly, it's not a strong point of mine, but I'm working on it, exhibiting a certain amount of patience for knowing the right time to undertake federal litigation. There will be a time, and obviously the big one on everybody's minds is the Rock Springs RMP. We are following that. We are keeping up with that. We are interacting with the governor's office related to that. But there will be a time for litigation regarding that. We just have to be patient to get to the right time for that and engage on the front end. So when we're ready to undertake that litigation, we're in the best possible position to do so. Then the last two things would be obviously support the AG's office budget. I don't have a lot of requests in there right now for attorney pay for all of the reasons I've already discussed with you. But in terms of the AG's budget, I start to think about attracting people and addressing our vacancy and workloads. The little things start to matter, not just pay. The little things start to matter, like being able to pay bar dues for my attorneys, being able to pay for CLEs or continuing education for my attorneys. Those things start to matter because some of the other attorney employers pay for those things. And they go a long way towards goodwill and understanding of how we value our employees. Which leads me to the final thing I would ask for, because I think it is going to take all of us to address this, and that would be to help change the narrative to any extent there's a narrative about the value of state employees and state work. I read these studies because I want to address my vacancy rate about what you can do to attract people to your office. And number one, obviously pay is very important, but running a close second is making employees feel valued and appreciated. And so we're aware of, and I undertake my efforts to do that, but we're aware of a certain narrative out there that employees are somehow less valued or it's a less honored profession because you work for a state government, or that they're not as wise. I submit to you, I have some of the experts in the state in my office, and I should. I have the expert in this state on the Colorado River, and he should be there, and I need to keep him there. I believe I have the expert in the state on criminal law, and she should be there, and I'd like to keep her there. And the same would be true for the people doing this type of work, our federal litigation. It's very important to the interests of the state of Wyoming and the people of the state. And so I need to be able to retain those experts. And what I'd like is to have a narrative that those people belong in my office, and they are there. And so to any extent we can all work together to change that narrative and make those people feel valued, that's something I would ask as well. I don't know what that specifically is. And so I know it's not helpful to give you those vague ideas, but at this time, those are the things that I would ask for related to help from the legislature. And I'll stand for any questions that you may have.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it. And just want to thank you and your office for the good work on the Converse County EIS and the similar lawsuit that was thrown out about, I guess, a working day or two before that. And, certainly appreciate all that. And So, yeah, we'll give out those kudos when, as they're appropriate. And certainly, there's been a lot of good work that's being done. And I know my constituents appreciate it in the southern part of the Powder River Basin. And I'm sure most people in the state appreciate it, or whether they realize it or not, there's a lot of revenue that's generated in that area. So, so first of all, thank you for that. It was excellent work on behalf of, from your agency. So had lots of positive feedback from my constituents, and as we were coordinating who was submitting affidavits and doing all this different stuff. So yeah, thank you for that, and congratulations on 2 significant victories. So
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
yeah,
Thank you.
so we'll do that first, but I have a question too, dealing with, you mentioned some states contract out work. Is that something that you all do to any great extent, or do you do it at all? What's your perspective on that, Andrew?
Sure, Mr. Chairman, we do not contract out a lot of that work, and my perspective is we should not in a lot of situations. Now, I will say there are examples where we have had to do that. If you'll recall, when we had Montana and Wyoming versus Washington, we did contract out that work because we simply did not have the capacity within our office to do that. But primarily, the preference within this state is to keep that work within our office. So it's all consistent. It's all related to the expertise that my office can bring to that. And so my preference is to keep that in-house with our folks. And again, traditionally, we have been able to undertake all that we have wanted to take. If an extraordinary circumstance comes up, obviously, that is something we would explore. Another example would be the school finance litigation where we're handling at the same time. We simply don't have enough attorneys on staff right now for school finance litigation. And as everybody knows, we ask for some additional attorney help. But it really is extraordinary circumstances that would have us looking for outside help, whereas those states I mentioned do it on a regular basis.
Okay, Sarah Cole.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Morning, Director, or excuse me, Attorney General Hill. There's a lot of things to probably unpack here with what this subject is dealing with. The number one thing is A&I. And I mean, you folks do a lot with a little. And I think that what I've heard is tell me what your opinion is. If you can tell me what your opinion is, that A&I is not properly evaluating potential hires, say attorneys in this case, on a quality that they're apparently not giving anyone credit for. I don't know how smart you are. We're not all the same. There's smart folks and dumb folks. I mean, we have a whole latitude of folks out there. Well, what I hear is they're just looking at everybody as one homogeneous group, and with that group, they decide that it's worth X amount of dollars per year to pay for those positions. And what I haven't heard is how do they quantify, frankly, a top attorney, say someone who's just graduated, just passed the bar. How do they quantify a top attorney in your opinion? Because you're our top attorney. So how do you get any, I don't know, any input when it comes to saying that, Jim Smith over here is really a top quality person, top in his class, the person that I need on staff. So I really want to know more about how we basically are hobbling ourselves by the restrictions on how much we're paying our attorneys. What are your thoughts on just that process and your input? Do you want more input? Do you think it's valuable? That's my general question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Senator Kolb, let me answer in 2 ways. First of all, we do have levels of attorneys within our office based on their years of experience and excuse me, and their expertise. And so I have a lot of say on that, whether I move somebody from, so we would classify those from P1, that would be your entry level attorney, to a P5, which would be your expert attorney that I speak of. So I have a lot of say on how we move those attorneys within the attorney pay system. The part that A&I, obviously I do have to get some approval from A&I, but but I have the final say related to that. Where A&I has an interplay there is they have set up the bands of salary that go with each of those classifications. So for a P1, the minimum is such, the maximum is such, and MPP, which would be kind of the midpoint if I'm using a shorthand term for what MPP stands for, the midpoint. So they are the ones that set those bands. And so that's what I speak about when I say the market pay study went down. It was the bands related to that. So I have a lot of discretion to set the folks as I want within the attorney pay plan. I had a lot less discretion to set what the attorney band, the payment was. That was a function of A&I. So they did go out and look at the market. And so your question was, did I interact with them at that point? I didn't, right? And I don't think the other attorneys within the state system did either. And that's why we're undertaking the attorney pay plan study. In that system and in the study, I will have a lot more say in terms of what is the market we need to look at? What are the things we need to be doing to assure that, exactly as you're saying, that the pay is equivalent to the expertise we're expecting in our office? And I am given to understand in conversations with A&I that those things, us pinpointing the things that we would like them to look at and the expertise that we would like them to take into account when setting those pay bands, is something they're looking for, our input on that. And I'm given to understand we will do that within the study.
Yeah, follow up, Mr. Chairman. So specifically, starting wages, P1, I guess, as you were saying, and P5. What, if I got that right, the top pay scale for your attorneys that you have? That's what I'd really want to know, because I was shocked to find out how low it is.
Sure.
And so could you please tell me that what the pay scale ranges are? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kolb, I never remember those numbers off the top of my head, so I had to bring my cheat sheet here. So the beginning salary for a P1 monthly, and I'm going to choose the midpoint if that's acceptable to you, would be $5,772. That runs around $62,000. Now my upper, my P5s, that would have them in the, so monthly again, P5, MPP, 12,861, which if I'm recalling correctly and doing the math, that's right around 130, 120 some, 130. They give it to me in monthly numbers, and so I haven't converted those to yearly, sir. But that's the midpoints we're starting at. But in terms of exactly what you're talking about, an expert that I can keep in my office, that's insufficient. Now, there is a maximum that I could go up to for my P5s, and that's true of all classifications. And the maximum is $15,433 per month. But I have to have the budget to go along with that. So two things are at play here. While I might be able to use that as the pay scale, I have to have the 100 series budget to be able to pay that. So when I tell you a budget request may be coming in the future, that is of what I speak. At some point, I may need additional 100 series budget. And so there's two components. There's the market rates and the rates set by A&I. But there's whether I have that budget authority from the legislature to be able to pay those maximums.
Any further questions, committee? And, doing the math there quickly, I saw about $180,000 a year, which, when you're thinking about the type of work and the consequences of, success or failure, that strikes me as, it just reminds me of some of the conversations we had around our state treasurer's office, where maybe, that very, highly trained people with lots of experience in that office make important decisions that affect the state. You know, they're managing billions of dollars, and I can remember a bill we passed not too long ago, giving some sort of an opportunity for incentive or bonus pay based off of performance. And and I think we have a bill or two that kind of contemplates something similar with a opportunity for bonuses and stuff like that. So do you have a perspective on allowing for some more flexibility within your office, especially start talking about cases that require a significant amount of expertise? The stakes are very high. Do you think it would be appropriate to have a similar type of incentive program in your office?
Mr. Chairman, yes, obviously that's something we would be interested in as well. I will note, because my system is a little different, the attorney pay plan system, and my ability to move people within those classifications is different than a lot of other state employment. To some extent, people can't just move people up, whereas I can. I try to account for that within the amounts I determine to pay them. Again, constrained by 100 series budget. But I can account for that a little better than some other state agencies can in the way that their employment works. But yes, do I think bonus system helps? Absolutely. Merit pay helps if I can apply that in a way that gives me the flexibility to apply it as I see fit.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Many questions, but I'm trying to focus on ones that I think would help in the general conversation.
Okay.
Go back to the people, the two attorneys you have that deal with federal issues. I mean, I appreciate your efficiency in utilizing your people to the utmost. Okay, I do. But I got to tell you, as that old adage goes, that anybody who represents himself in court has a fool for an attorney. And I think anybody who thinks that we're going to get the top best quality attorney that we need in very specific areas and arenas, I think is not being realistic. I mean, so I realize there's many conflicts here, but my thought is, you tell me that our federal resource attorneys are busy. I mean, busy, are always busy. Well, it sounds like we need more. And I mean, we're risking billions in worrying about some $200,000 a year salary, or for that matter, $400,000 a year. It becomes immaterial because the risk is too great. So beyond your budgetary constraints and, all these other factors that go into what I just spoke about, would you agree that having the best representation for a federal issue in this case is in the state's best interest? These people thank God we have people that love their job. But frankly, I think the best folks out there, we need someone who frankly wants to get paid for their job, can do it, because maybe they don't love what I love here in the state of Wyoming. So are you, I guess maybe a better way of saying this, are you opposed to hiring higher expertise counsel for specific needs when it comes to the federal government in dealing with them in court? And I'll just leave it at that. Do you think we're going to do the best job we can with who we have, or do we have to go beyond what we have and try to find more resources to litigate this when the right time comes in the future? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kolb. So no, I'm not opposed to hiring experts when extraordinary circumstances come, as I have indicated. Second, though, do I think this type of litigation is handled very well by my office and possibly by people that are well equipped to do it within the state? Absolutely. What you're talking about here is record review of administrative actions primarily. And that work is handled a lot by my office with success, as the chairman had indicated, because that's the type of work that they do. They understand FLTMA, they understand the Mineral Leasing Act, they understand the EPA and the Endangered Species Act very well, because that is their practice almost exclusively. I don't know that there is a significant amount of attorneys within the state that is their practice exclusively. Now, there are some that do that, but am I opposed? I think your question was two-part. Am I opposed to hiring that expertise? No. If extraordinary circumstances came and we needed to do that, I absolutely would explore that. But do I think the people in my office are very well equipped to handle that type of litigation as well? Yes, I do.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Follow up. Yeah, I didn't mean to impugn that your folks aren't good people. That's the problem when you talk about this. Now, we're in a committee meeting and we're talking about an open conversation about the deep concern for the best we can do. And it doesn't revolve around what, the pay is rather immaterial at this point because the situation is such. I think what you've told me is when folks, you got 100% of your people busy, and thank God they are, and they're dedicated to what they do. You need more people. And the question is, I don't, we go and hire these folks out of college and we get what we pay for. Thank God we can find good people that are in there for the right reasons. But frankly, we end up training people and they leave us, right? That's the nature of paying people bottom dollar. So I'm mostly concerned that, we're basically perpetuating a problem. And I'd like to hear just, you want to raise that base up, or would you be, providing the budget was there? What, if you didn't have a budget constraint, maybe that's a better question. What would you want for your legal counsel, your group? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kolb, if I didn't have a budget constraint, honestly, I would like a good mix of the type of experience we have in our office, and here is why. I would like a good mix because we need some experts at the top. We need some folks in the middle that can handle issues on their own, but we need some folks at the bottom too. So we're training them up to become the experts when those folks retire, because that's a lot of what I've experienced too, is a lot of folks retiring to leave my office. So I would like a good mix of it. But are you pinpointing one of the issues? Yes, we train these. I'm certainly aware of it. We train these new attorneys in my office and then they leave for better opportunities. So would it be fair to say that I'm missing the middle right now? Absolutely. That is one of the areas where we could be doing better. And if I had no budget constraints, that's what I would want to do right now, is fill my middle. So it's people that could handle issues on their own, but take mentorship from the experts I already have in place. And so you have pinpointed certainly one of our issues. My middle's lacking.
I think, Senator Kolb is hitting on some, a concern whether we think it's valid or not. And it may be beneficial. I don't expect an answer right now, but I can say anecdotally, I've been happy with your work, especially over the past 2 weeks. But would it be possible to just put together, of the cases that you argue, what your success rate is, and just have a larger picture that you're in a narrative there that you're ready to share with some of our colleagues, and so we can sort of compare the effectiveness of the AG's office versus if there is a private firm that does comparable work. I think that would be helpful. I understand there's never going to be a perfect correlation. For example, I'm sure you take some cases that you're probably not going to win, but there's political considerations that don't exist in the private sector. But is that even possible to try to come up with some sort of, more statistical analysis as to the effectiveness of the AG's office? Because like I said, I want to make sure you're ready for February. So do you have any thoughts on that?
Mr. Chairman, it's certainly something I'm willing to try to undertake. You've hit on some of the issues that we would have with that. Obviously, understanding what your measure of success to be is going to be difficult too. Is it sending it back for the federal government to try again. Do we consider that success? Getting a decision that we liked upheld, getting one sent back, but then it ended up the way we would like it to. So it will be a little bit complicated in terms of what our measure of success is and how we measure that. But I'm certainly willing to try to undertake that and then explain how we measured the success or the number that we came up with, how we viewed that as success. But in addition, the things that you point out, some cases are taken and we were not certain of our ability to succeed in those cases. Maybe I could put it that way.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a response to the APD litigation. There were a couple of motions filed. One was a motion to dismiss, arguing a standing issue. And then there were other motions filed like that. If argument didn't win the day, then to, sever the Wyoming APDs and try and bring those back from the DC court to the Wyoming court. Fortunately, it was a defendant intervener, I think, that led the charge on the motion to dismiss on standing. So to the AG's point, that would be difficult to quantify as a win for the AG's office. They didn't write that brief. It was a different defendant intervener, even though they were all on the same team.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kind of to dovetail on your last thought. Once again, don't take what I say as critically negative. It's just I'm a critical thinker. So I think that we learn by what our failures are. And I think for me, my personal thought is could you identify the failures and an explanation about why it failed? In other words, was it a lack of staff? Was it insurmountable? Like what you were litigating, was it just not going to work, but we had to do it because it was a political pressure? Just an analysis of what failed. I mean, I think we're all happy with what passes, right? What works, but you get I think you get a pathway forward to understand why it failed. At least I think from my perspective, failure is more of a tool to learn than a success. And so on that note, I think a list of something that didn't work out the way you would have liked it, and just a brief explanation about why you think it turned out that way. Just obviously it's your opinion, but you're our Attorney General, and I would look forward to hearing such things if you in your views on that idea. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kolb, it's certainly something I'm willing to try to undertake. I think we'll have some of the same problems deciding whether it was failure or not, but with the same caveat, I'm willing to give it a go and explain why I thought it was a failure, and see if there's something that we can come up with and explain that. I'm certainly willing to try.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you very much for your work and the work of your office. It is appreciated. So thanks for being here today. Okay, as we've heard about our federal natural resource policy account, we'll have that up next. Start with the County Commissioners Association and finishing with the Governor's Office. Maybe we'll start with the Governor's Office. Never mind, we'll just be patient. It'll be okay. Okay, welcome, gentlemen. Please introduce yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
All right. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Jeremiah Riemann here on behalf of the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. Appreciate the opportunity to talk about this position in our office. And I've asked Micah Christensen, who holds that job as our natural resource counsel, to kind of go through some background and kind of what his work looks like at the current time. And then I'll come in on the back end, talk a little bit about litigation and perhaps some recommendations that we have. So that, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Christensen.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you. Again, my name is Micah Christensen. I currently serve as the Natural Resource Counsel for the Wyoming County Commissioners Association, and I've been happy to do so. I've been in the position for about 2 years now. In 2010, this position was created under the leadership of Governor Dave Friedenthal. At its conception, it was really intended to establish and institutionalize technical and legal expertise in the natural resource management space, and particularly focusing on local governments. As you heard from Attorney General Bridget Hill about FNRPA being more of a front-end device sometimes, this is definitely in that category. We're very complementary with the Attorney General's office, and I'm sure Jeremiah will mention that more later, but it is front end. We're focused on the legal and regulatory dynamic between federal and local governments, resolving potential issues before they become substantial problems. Major components of the position include education, increasing engagement at the local level, creating working relationships with state and federal officials, and identifying opportunities for collaborative solutions. So before I took this job, I called the past Natural Resource Council, and I actually talked to one of the first to see sort of what the day in a life of Natural Resource Council for the association looks like. Before this job, I was working for the Attorney General's office, representing the Wyoming Oil and Gas Conservation Commission. And I will admit there was far more of a routine in my old position. When I asked the two previous councils, they sort of hemmed and hawed and gave this large platitude of what's happening, but it's largely because it's dependent upon a lot of things I have very little control over. That mainly being federal agency action, and then certain needs that arise at the county level. Nevertheless, we do focus primarily in those areas, education and training. Just this last May, we had our Federal Partners Day. As Senator Kolb certainly understands, commissioners don't stay commissioners forever. And so we need additional training to keep folks engaged and educated on these spaces. And so we had a training to introduce not only to our commissioners, but also state government, different agencies, their creation, how we interact with them, how we can communicate with them, and ways we can be better partners. This year, we'll be participating in NEPA training. It'll be a comprehensive training that's scheduled for May of 2024. And again, we'll invite our state agency partners that work in this space to make sure that our rising tide can raise all ships in Wyoming. I'm also participating in the Rock Springs RMP working group that the governor's office has put forward, and doing other engagements, such as speaking at the Wyoming Association of Conservation Districts just next week. On the coordination side, my position serves as the liaison between counties and the governor's office on natural resource issues. So I'm in fairly constant communication with the governor's office. I'm sure some folks in the room, including Randall Luthi, would appreciate if I would quit calling them as much as I do. But the truth is, better communication leads to better outcomes for the state. And so we do our best to make sure we talk about all the salient issues that come up in this natural resource space. Just last month, we hosted a governor and county coordination meeting in Green River to talk about impacts and potential opportunities for the governor's office and counties to coordinate and work on the Rock Springs RMP. I also serve as the facilitator of the Thunder Basin National Grassland Working Group through the U.S. Forest Service. So I get to, in that instance, serve as sort of a referee or assistant, if you will, on all the great work that's been happening in the TBNG. As far as NEPA engagement, it's certainly one of the highlights of the position. And one of the reasons I really wanted to do this job is to increase this local engagement and efficacy of counties serving as cooperating agencies. Back to the point that we have new commissioners and there's turnover, it's really important for this position to encourage new commissioners to participate in these processes. As you know, counties have a unique role in NEPA as a regulatory arm of the state, also with special expertise to assist federal agencies go through that NEPA work. But we have to make sure we're there. We have to make sure that county commissioners are not just there, but prepared to participate. So right now, I'm working with 16 counties on the sage grouse plan amendments. It's actually a great idea that I can't take full credit for. Other county commissioners recommended it, that we pool our resources together, speak with one voice, and provide an opportunity to encourage new commissioners who might see a sage grouse amendment process to be rather daunting, but instead, bring them along with. So we have an educational component as well. So as I tell the BLM when I talk to them about sage grouse is that counties are committed. We're so committed that we have meetings before and after the cooperating agency meetings. We're bringing in experts across from mining to agriculture to oil and gas so that we can better understand the issues, so that we can better serve as cooperating agencies with our federal partners. I'm also currently working with our state BLM office right now to make sure that county commissioners are always at the table by ensuring that we have proper lines of communication and representation on all our NEPA that happens in the state. But NEPA isn't the only federal agency work that I do. As you know, NEPA is time consuming, but it can't consume everything. We work on writing comments on various regulations, including CEQ's NEPA rules, the BLM's conservation land health rules, the Wyoming County Commissioners Association hosted with the EPA a WOTUS roundtable. We were one of the several that were selected to host that for their rule rollout, amongst numerous other comments. We also spend ample time working with our congressional delegation, but an exciting new initiative, the Congressional Tour Initiative, is now in its third year. We were blessed to have Representative Winter join us in our inaugural tour in the Bighorn Basin, where we brought out 12 staffers from DC that are on natural resource committees. We can actually show them what it looks like to graze on public lands, or what a healthy forest looks like versus one that's been burned because of poor management. We get to work with folks like Kelly Norris with State Forestry and talk about GNA and the importance of our state being able to take the lead on some of these projects. And obviously also bringing along with our federal partners to allow them to hear firsthand from people on the ground what that looks like. So a day in the life of my position is varied, but it's a lot of meetings, it's a lot of phone calls, and a lot of work with county commissioners across the state. And I'm very happy to do it. So thank you for your support of the position, and I'll open it for any questions. Thank you.
Mr.
Okay,
Chairman, if I can continue just a little bit, I want to start back from the beginning. Micah mentioned this position starting in 2010 under Governor Friedenthal. At the time, there was concern about the number of resource management plans that were being developed across the state. Of course, you also had the first iteration of the greater sage grouse land use plan amendments. And so counties were trying to figure out how they could participate. And the governor's office was worried about a 23 county request to have attorneys and other staff in place. And so a deal was struck. Why don't we fund one position, a natural resource council, and place that within the County Commissioners Association, so that that can then be a resource for all 23 of those counties. As you can imagine, in the counties, the county attorney is, neck deep in plenty of other criminal and civil issues, and really doesn't have a whole lot of time to devote to this space. And so this concept was born. This position, and to this day, is supported by the Federal Natural Resource Policy account, the FNRPA account that you all fund. And we're very, very, very thankful for that. We've had a number of individuals go through that position through the years. I'm fortunate that I was there for the first interviews of the first individual that took that position, and now to be at the association as we continue that legacy. And I'll come back to the funding component here in a little bit. Appreciate Micah going through that rundown. He mentioned the congressional tour. I'll just note that the third iteration does happen next year, and that's headed to the western part of the state. So Senator Kolb and Representative Heiner will be in your region, and certainly you'll be invited to participate, as all of you are welcome on that. It really has been a good thing for us to infuse better knowledge of the situation here on the ground in Wyoming and how we are solving these issues collectively. I was really impressed with the conversation around good neighbor authority. Micah and I, as well as the state forester and the Forest Service, had those staffers on a good neighbor authority project that ultimately feeds the water system that comes here into Cheyenne. And it was, I think, a really impressive thing, including a couple of individuals that are writing the new farm bill that ultimately will include these sorts of things. So we're seeing a great success from that particular initiative. As Micah said, his position is focused on proactive work primarily, but I know part of your heading here in consideration is litigation, and I don't want to ignore the fact that that is a critical component to this resource battle that can exist. And part of Micah's position does occasionally come into assisting or initiating litigation. I'll just mention a few examples. We typically do that with the support of the governor's office or following their lead, as well as the Attorney General's office. We were involved with the Converse County EIS case, and we're excited with the initial results of that case. We participated in the Upper Green River grazing amendment and the battle over grizzly bear take and other issues that existed there. Historically, we've been involved with regional haze litigation as well as hydraulic fracturing. And I could envision that there could be other cases that come forward in the not too distant future around resource management plans, WOTUS, and others that will take an active interest in. And we do have a process by which we consider those cases with the commissioners. Takes a 2/3 vote of our counties in order to pursue that. So when we get in, we're serious and we want to prevail in that work. With that, Mr. Chairman, we'd be happy to stand for questions, but in anticipation of a question of what could we use in this space, I'll just offer two things. One, we've been at this approach for more than a decade. It's been successful in working with the state collaboratively and with the federal agencies. I think it's beyond time that we don't codify the relationship that we have of Micah's position so that I'm not having to sit there every 2 years or he's worried about that. I think this is an important piece of the equation as we stand shoulder to shoulder with you in trying to address these issues statewide. The second part of that, and it goes even further to our ability to be proactive in this space, is we need additional capacity as well. And in particular, I'm looking at our ability to address the sort of scientific and technical elements of these plans and make sure that the county commissioners have that expertise. I'll tell you, far too often, we're going to the FNRPA account and asking for one-off requests and then going out and trying to find a contractor. I think we can do a better job for you if we just had those resources internally, a staff member that was there and was constantly doing this work and making sure that we could marry things up. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll be happy to, as Micah will as well, to take any questions, but certainly, again, please do accept our appreciation for your support through the last decade or so for this particular position as a resource to the counties, and hopefully you see it as a resource to the state.
And so if I understand that last bit there, so Mike's position is currently authorized through a budget and that's it. And it's kind of every biennium you have to hold your breath and see if it's still going to be there. Is that the way I understand it?
Mr. Chairman, you fund the FNRPA account and we go to the governor's office and make a budgetary request of them for a portion of funds from that account in order to support Micah's position. We do that in 2-year increments, so through the biennium. Sure be a lot nicer if we could have a longer trajectory, even 4 years, but even further, I'm suggesting perhaps codifying that this is something that the state of Wyoming is going to have.
Okay, any questions for the county commissioners? Senator Kolb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Morning, Jeremiah. I guess this bigger question I have about the FERNERPA account is, as I understand, it's $1 million in the biennium. Is that what it is? Well, whatever that number is it, do you feel that that account is funded enough for the upcoming issues that we're going to face with the federal government? And those kind of, it's going to be an ongoing battle. I don't see this changing. It's going to probably just get worse into the future. So I guess I'd like to hear your opinion about the amount of money that's available. And I realize this is the governor's bailiwick also, but just if you had any thoughts on that subject. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kolb, great question. Certainly something that the governor's office should be able to address more specifically in terms of the budget amount, but I believe generally you've attempted to keep roughly $1 million to $2 million available in that count for a biennium. And the funds can roll over within the statutory authorization that's there. At the level of engagement that I think you're envisioning, that I'm envisioning, and that I think others are envisioning, you're going to have to put additional resources in order for us to be able to get the talent that's necessary in order to pursue cooperation, coordination, litigation, whatever it is within these planning processes.
Mr. Co-Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This question is to both of you. I don't know which one wants to answer this, but Mr. Christensen is one person. And you have 23 counties clamoring for his assistance. They all have the different emphasis of what's important. So help me understand how when you decide to unleash Micah to go after one topic, because there's a broad spectrum out there. And I can see every county wanting his assistance for their problem. So do you have to get 2/3 vote before you send him out on a dusty trail, or is there? How do you manage his time? I guess is the question I have, Jeremiah.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Feiner, it's a great question. And I do want Micah to offer his perspective because he's sitting in that position right now and feeling the pressures that exist here. I think all of you know me to be a doer. I want to try and solve every issue that's out there and be involved. And that's sort of the approach that we try and take. If a county comes forward with a natural resource issue that needs some support, I want to be able to unleash him in that process. I think part of the problem is that these things can come in huge waves, and we're in one of those big waves. We're talking about the Rock Springs Resource Management Plan. We're talking about greater sage grouse. We have the Black Hills starting into their process. He needs to be involved there. We know that the Bridger Teton is going to be considering land use plans, and maybe others are as well. So it does become a balancing act, and we're having to let a few things slip through the cracks right now in order to be able to unleash his talent on those two big priorities, the sage grouse and Rock Springs RMP, which means we aren't responding to letters that we're going to have to send out relative to other planning processes or rulemakings that the federal government is pursuing. And that's part of where my second suggestion came forward of if I could get some resource under him that is focused on those more technical elements and can manage contracts that we might have outside of our association, we'll be better prepared to assist the counties, assist the state in the process. But I'd love for Micah to be able to share his thoughts too.
Oh,
Go ahead.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as a follow-up to that, is it the governor's office that decides whether you can embed someone underneath Mr. Christensen, or is that something the legislature would decide?
Mr. Chairman, it could be both. I will be very clear. We've had some form of this conversation from the beginning of this governor's administration. We began to develop out that proposal, and then Micah's predecessor left. So I didn't get that across the finish line. So we've had the conversation with them. They certainly could fund it from within existing FNRPA resources, but it is also something that you could put a stamp on, whether that's your some sort of direction through the budget or some sort of statutory authorization that this is a part of the equation that you want to have in place.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director? A question. Would you work with the State Attorney General's office? Have you worked with State Attorney General's office? Because if you're envisioning maybe I don't know, a more permanent funding stream, and I guess I'd like to know your thoughts on that and just how would that interaction work if it hasn't in the past? I don't know. It's an open-ended question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, absolutely work with the Attorney General's office. It's one of my expectation that Micah is having regular communication with them and that we're walking hand in hand in these issues. And I'd love for him to be able to talk about what he's doing in that regard. So.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kolb. So first we'll go reverse. State Attorney General's office. This is a rather a monthly email communication pretty constantly with the AGs that serve particularly in the HB 300 realm. So the FNRPA funded federal litigation. Our commissioners are often asked to provide affidavits and also participate even when the association isn't participating actively in that litigation. So it is a constant communication between those two, our association and the Attorney General's office. With respect to Chairman Heiner's question about managing time, picking between 23 counties, I'll tell you it's worse than that. It's not just 23 counties. It's 23 counties, the governor's office, state agencies, federal agencies, because the association has a lot to offer, quite frankly, everyone in that respect. It's uniquely positioned to bridge a gap between industry. I participate in a monthly NRC call with non-governmental folks. So I'm on the phone with Jim McGagna and PAW, talking about the needs of their associations. And so there's more than just counties in that respect too. And that's part of the position. So it's not a complaint. That's the reality. But as far as managing the actual work, I am fortunate to have two committees that I work primarily with, the Public Lands, Energy and Environment Committee and the Public Lands, Agriculture, Water and Public Lands Committee that both have chairmen that are active. County commissioners are doers as well. And so many of them are engaged. And so they give me phone calls. I'm certainly going to answer the phone when a county commissioner calls, even if it's on Friday, which I was supposed to have off. Let's just note that, please. But as far as picking the work, there is sort of a consensus. I try to approach issues that impact the entire state. So for example, when you're looking at, you only have so much bandwidth to be able to write comments to federal agencies, which ones matter the most to Wyoming counties? Well, the fluid mineral leasing rule impacts a lot of Wyoming counties because industry is important to our state, and having unnecessarily high bonding requirements is a detriment to industry. And so we work again through those committees to not only come up with concepts of comments, but also review those comments before they're submitted to the federal agencies. And so trying to focus on more of a comprehensive approach to that specific work. But again, in the background, there's the other planning and education that takes place sort of generally as well. But as far as specific issues, I try to make sure I don't intercede on the place of a county attorney. So county commissioner calls me up and says, I have a question about a public meeting. I say, there's a really good attorney in your county you should probably talk to about that. I can send some of that away. But for the most part, I don't really turn things down. If a county commissioner is interested in some work and they've asked me to work on it, I'm working on it. So I don't do a very good job managing my time in that sense because I don't say no very often, but we do a lot of work on behalf of all the counties in the state.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Guess to the Board of County Commissioners in general, do you consider your relationship with the State Attorney General as collaborative? And not in a fluffy, woke sense, but in a real way that you're working together and maybe, I don't know how you share this type of situation where, I mean, you may have a common goal. How do you collaborate, I guess, is maybe a broader question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman Senator Kolb. As far as collaborating with the Attorney General's office, it is a little more difficult in the sense that the Attorney General's office is really there for the lawsuit, the tail end. So that collaboration takes place a little bit, I would say, throughout the process. So you're looking at we'll just take, for example, a resource management plan. Just pick one. And the question of whether or not there's going to be sufficient evidence in that record, or there's going to be something in that record that may assist a lawsuit in the future. Those are certainly things that the Attorney General's office can point out to folks that are participating in that process. But we're not collaborating in the sense that we're looking, laying landmines, if you will, trying to trap our federal partners into making a bad decision so we can sue them later. We're trying to avoid landmines altogether and essentially have a better RMP decision than focusing on, in our process as cooperating agencies, focusing on the ability to sue them later. That's not the intent of the cooperation that we're trying to bring. However, that being said, that's why it's important to have institutional knowledge about NEPA. It's important to have institutional knowledge about FLIPMA and NIFMA and all the other acronyms that deal with our federal land management, because we have case law that describes issues of other planning efforts. The sage grouse is a fine example. The reason that we're still managing under 2015 is because 2015 and 2019 have been litigated. And I am going to tell you that 2023 will be litigated as well. So how do we avoid the problems of the past and do better in the future? That's something that does take some collaboration. But as far as the Attorney General's office in particular, we're not necessarily collaborating on the front end. It's more of a after the fact, picking up the pieces, figuring out sort of eyewitnesses, what happened, how did this break down, how did we end up here types of conversations.
Any further questions for the county commissioners? Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it. Last and certainly not least, we have Mr. Luthi with the governor's office. Welcome, sir.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Randall Luthi. I'm the energy advisor for Governor Gordon. As I sat and listened to all the things that the county commissioners and particularly the fund has been promoting, I have to say amen. Amen to their efforts. You had the AG here earlier, and she talked about a couple of litigation successes we've had. But frankly, you don't win the litigation at the time of filing. Most of the time, if you're going to win or lose, has been determined long before that. And one of the reasons is you look at what federal agencies do, there's generally two actions. You do management action or you do a regulatory action. The management action normally falls as a major federal action, which would fall under NEPA. So therefore, you start following that process. And counties and states are cooperating agencies through most of those types of decisions. And I can tell you from the governor's office, the counties, the conservation districts, the information and assistance they give us, because FNRPA helps them pay for that, has been absolutely invaluable. You have the governor's full support for this position. I was actually appreciated the history that Mr. Jeremiah gave us because I was gone out of Wyoming through some of that. So I appreciate that. He has also come forward with some recommendations. I can tell you that we are willing to discuss those kinds of recommendations. The governor's budget will be out in the near future. And just maybe some questions, this is normally, these are state funds. So normally they go to a state agency, they come through the governor's office. That is your traditional way of accounting and keeping track of state funds. Should you want to go around that process, let's discuss it if that's what we really want to do. We don't often appropriate money directly to a non-state agency. You can do, but let's discuss it and make sure we understand what we're doing. So I think and I'm not here to, fortunately for all of you, I think my comments are just about near an end. But one, governor supports this position. The governor greatly appreciates what the counties through this position have been able to do. And two, what it does is actually help us in that litigation mode because they have already been they have submitted comments. These are things that will be litigated upon, and often they bring a perspective that the state agencies cannot. On most rulemaking, how it works in our office is I will see it in the Federal Register. I will ask our state agencies whether or not they're going to comment on it. We'll work with them as they go through their comments. And then the governor also submits a letter regarding those federal regulations. At the same time, the counties are often doing a very similar thing. They've gone out to the counties that have an interest. They find out what each county is interested in, and they provide those comments back. They also provide us a copy with those comments. So as I or someone else is working on the governor's letter, get ready, we can read those comments as well. And frankly, I've never been shy about using some of that information in the governor's letter as well. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I think maybe better, I'll just stand for questions.
Any questions for the governor's office? Okay, Mr. Co-Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Luthi, thank you for being here, for all your service for the state of Wyoming over the past years. As an attorney yourself, you probably understand more of what Mr. Christensen is going through with all the responsibilities he has trying to take care of the state with the counties and as well as different agencies. And so when we heard this morning that they would like someone to help him out, maybe a paralegal or someone that he can help cover that load. Is that something that the governor's office is aware of? Have they been asked for that additional expenditure in the past? I assume it would come out of the FNRPA process, but is that something that the governor would support?
Thank you, Mr. Heiner. I was afraid you were going to ask that. I am not the point person that is on the Federal Natural Resources Policy Account budget. So I have to say I do not know the answer to that. I'm sure Jeremiah and Micah could say whether or not they've discussed it. But again, those are all part of those budget negotiations and making sure we use this account wisely.
Any further questions, Senator Kolb?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I'd like to comment in a positive way that the ham-handed statement in that statement by the governor's office is very well articulated. I'd like to thank whoever was the author of that. And then, but more importantly,
was that subtle enough, Senator Kolb?
It was, it wasn't meant to be, but yes, very, very subtle in that way. The money for the FNRPA account, any thoughts about how much the budgetary needs will be? Do you see them increasing? And what are your thoughts on what future we may have to fund that to, or maybe it's adequate? Just your opinion about where we're at and where we're going to be. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kolb, again, I'm a little bit cautious in that the governor's budget is really in its final stages of being prepared. There are changes that are made before it comes out in just a few days. So I would be ahead of myself if I said that in the budget there won't be a request or not a request, because I frankly, I just don't know the answer. I will share with you all that Representative Heiner, thank you for your kind comment about, you didn't say the number of years, that I've been involved in this, but I was around when this account was created. So will it be sufficient? To date, we're doing okay, but I couldn't agree more that what's ahead of us is we're just starting a tide of regulations and federal actions that we have got to be able to respond to. But I'm confident the governor knows that, and I think you'll see that reflected in the budget.
Any further questions? Okay. Thanks, sir.
Mr.
Appreciate it.
Chairman, thank you and members of the committee, thank you for the support of this account.
Okay, any public comment on this issue? Talk about our litigation, how we prepare for that before and after the fact. Anybody online? Okay, last chance in the room. Okay, looks like public comment is closed. Committee, any discussion on this topic? Sounds like we'll learn more when the budget's released. So. Okay, that being said, we'll move on to our 11 a.m. topic. A little bit behind, but that's okay. Next up, we have 24 LSO 295 Cooperation Succession Federal Agencies. Also, let's go ahead and do an overview here.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Talise Hansen, LSO. I am presenting 24 LSO 295 Cooperation Cessation Federal Agencies. This bill draft would authorize the governor to not cooperate with or assist any federal land management agency. Section 1 creates Wyoming Statute 91225. Subsection A provides that if the governor determines in writing that any federal land management agency is initiating, pursuing, or engaging in policies that harm the state, the governor may cease to cooperate with or assist the agency. The governor may resume cooperation and assistance with the federal land management agency when the governor deems appropriate. Subsection B provides that the governor may direct each agency as defined by Wyoming Statute 92-1002A1 to not cooperate with or assist the federal land management agency until the governor deems appropriate. Subsection C provides that except as otherwise provided, an agency shall not be subject to enforcement of the state laws or regulations relating to the cooperation or assistance of a federal land management agency during the period of non-cooperation. Subsection D provides that a prosecutor shall not file or pursue charges against any agency for a violation of a state law or regulation relating to the cooperation or assistance of a federal land management agency if the violation occurred during the period of non-cooperation. This subsection shall not apply to criminal offenses committed by an agency. Subsection E provides that the governor may encourage local government officials to not cooperate with or assist any federal land management agency during the period of non-cooperation deemed by the governor. And subsection F provides a sunset date of July 1, 2025. Section 2 provides an immediate effective date, and I'll stand for any questions.
Any questions for LSO? Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate the work, please. So next up, we have the governor's office again. So you went all the way in the back. Welcome back, Mr. Luthi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Randall Luthi, the governor's energy advisor. And I think to begin with, I want to say I personally appreciate the message we're trying to do here. I personally appreciate the interest that this committee has in the ability of the governor to do his job. Now, with that, then, may come just a couple of questions as you go forward or not go forward with whatever you might do with this proposed legislation. And the first one is I believe the governor has the authority to do this now. We appreciate the support, but again, I believe that falls within the prerogative of the executive branch of the government. Two, I do have some concern about how broad the current language is. You use the term agency, and maybe just to be, let's go with a hypothetical example. Say that there is a federal agency that does resource management plans. And say there is a resource management plan that is eventually adopted, which the governor and others may deem as not in the best interests of Wyoming. The legislature says the governor may then cease to cooperate with that agency. So does that mean all across the board we do not cooperate with that agency? Or does that mean the governor can limit it to maybe the specific resources or the specific plan that you're being considered? That is that is concerning to me, because even in the times when we are busily litigating against the federal government, and I might add, the Attorney General's office was a little bit, they did not toot their horn very loud, but currently there's approximately 35 different cases and natural resource cases that they're doing right now. So we're often litigating with the federal government, but that doesn't mean there aren't some areas where we are able to cooperate with them. You know, does the cooperation mean where that agency is no longer able to work with through the EIS process as a cooperating agency with the state? What does that mean? So that would be another concern that I have, is this bill might be far too broad of what you're attempting to do. I also would jump in maybe to the last section. It gives the governors, it says he may advise the local governments. I mean, frankly, he could do that now, and may doesn't do much as a rule in statutes. So is it necessary? So with that, Mr. Chairman, those are my initial thoughts, but I would like to say that we stand ready to continue to work with you on language or changes should you decide to move this forward.
Okay, any questions for the governor's office? Senator Kolb.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I do appreciate your positive support for us looking into this. Now, beyond that, I didn't say anything in this and that said shall. There's nothing that compels the governor to do. Really, it's up to the governor's option. And I guess but what I really want to go down further on a conversation was the need. So that was my question. Can the governor do this already? I mean, is there anything within this bill draft proposal that does something that the governor can't currently do, in your opinion? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kolb, thank you for that. And again, since you allowed me to say, in my opinion, I would say the governor has full authority to do this now.
Okay. Mr. Co-Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Luthi, with that being said, you believe, in your opinion, that the governor can already do this, but if we codify this and then repeal it, what we just codified in another year and a half, does that essentially try to take away some of that authority that the governor has today that we put into law and then take the law away?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Heiner, very interesting point. Again, if you follow your line of thinking that, okay, the legislature has authorized the governor to do something, even though it may be may, and then in a year and a half it sunsets, does that mean he no longer has that authority? That I believe was basically your question. So I'll go back to my premise that the governor has the ability to do that now. One would hope that I would make the argument he would retain that authority throughout the duration of the statute, and he would have it after the statute of limitations took effect.
Okay, follow up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So thank you for that clarification. The other concern I have is, okay, the governor already has this authority, but in here it says a prosecutor shall not file or pursue charges against any agency for violation. Can that happen right now? If you know, is this to protect something that If an agency decides not to cooperate, can they actually have a prosecutor file an action against them?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Heiner, and again, my experience may be somewhat limited, but I too struggled with the possibility that this could or has happened or would happen. Because once again, you're dealing with the state prosecutorial system, whether that be the county prosecutor, rather it be the AG. It just isn't, certainly the AG is very unlikely to prosecute something against a state agency. Certainly the county might, but then you run into problems with separation of powers and also just the other duties you deal with. I had avoided that section because frankly, I didn't know what it meant.
Right, that was the intent behind the bill draft, was the idea that if there was some current state law that required the governor to do, this or the other, then that'd give him the discretion to not have to necessarily follow that law for that limited amount of time. And so, that was the intent of what we're trying to accomplish. It's my understanding the governor should follow the law, right? But this would give him a window to, have that discretion. But then again, you do bring up the interesting question of, what's the separation of powers issues here between, I guess in this case, the legislative and the judicial branch, or the executive branch, as the case may be. So, did you consider any of those dynamics there? That, and I don't have, I'll tell you, I don't have a specific example, but something that may benefit to have a little bit more flexibility for this limited amount of time.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate that question, and I will admit that I was out of the office last week. I grabbed this. I did some, quick thoughts. I haven't been able to talk to the AG's office about it, but I'm certainly willing to go into it in more detail. But once again, I'm coming back to my first statement, is I don't believe there's anything in this bill that the governor cannot already do.
Okay, any further questions, committee? Okay. Thank you
Mr.
very
Chairman,
much.
members of the committee, thank you once again.
All right, do you have any further public comment on 24 LSO 295? Now's your time. Anybody online? Okay, come back in the room, last chance. Okay, public comment is closed. Committee, do you have any discussion on this bill draft or this topic in general? Okay. Yeah, if there's no motion, then we'll right.
Second.
But, well, nobody's moving
I'll
in, so,
move.
okay, moved by Senator Kolb. Do we have a second? Okay, so looks like we'll have a similar piece of legislation a little bit later in the afternoon, and appreciate the testimony from Mr. Luthi here. I think that's some points that are well taken, so. Okay, any further discussion on this topic? Okay, cool. All right, well, that gets us back on schedule here. So, yeah, we'll go ahead and break for lunch at this point. We'll come back at 1 o'clock to take up our afternoon agenda.